Okay, hello and welcome. Today I'm going to paint a little landscape, and this is my first time doing one while I'm talking while I'm painting, so please bear with me. I hope this is something that will be helpful. I'm just going to start by painting a very simple landscape. This one is predominantly sky with a little bit of trees at the bottom. So I'm just going to start by just indicating my horizon line. As you can see, it's quite low. Most of this is going to be sky. We're going to have some trees in here. I'm not even going to bother drawing in the trees just at this point. I'm going to worry about painting those ones in. So I'm going to start by wetting the sky. This paper is Archer's rough watercolour paper. This one is a 300 GSM. I've actually turned this pad into a block by sealing each edge, so I don't have to worry about masking my paper. The reason I did that with this pad is because it's such a small pad. I don't want to lose paper with the masking tape at the edges, which is normally what I would do. I would normally mask each side to hold the paper in place. So I'm just going to make sure I've got a nice sort of even coat of water so we get a nice soft blend in the sky. The paints I'm using today are Daniel Smith Watercolour. It's my own custom palette, so I can talk through the colours as I go. So first I'm going to start with Imperial Purple. And I'm going to just add it to this left side here. And bringing it down. I'm just sort of following the shapes of the clouds in my reference. I will try and link the photo that I'm painting from in the description. This is a photo I've taken myself, and I just thought it would be a nice little jumping off point if I continue to do these kinds of videos in the future. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix in a little bit of Prussian Blue. I have a phthalo blue in my palette, but the Prussian is a little bit more muted, so I want to go with that in my sky here. And then I'm going to mix in, not in with the blue, just on its own, a very watered down version of Permanent Alizarin Crimson. Not too watered because I know this is going to fade back a bit. I'm going to add this into the bottom here. Most of this is going to get covered up with trees, so I'm not too concerned. I'm really just using my reference as a guide. I'm not following it exactly. Okay, and I'm just going to pop this in at the top as well, because I have some pinker clouds at the top. So the next thing I'm going to do is, while this paint is still wet, I'm going to use some paper towel to actually lift out a little bit of this colour, okay, especially on the pink clouds, and I'm just dabbing at the paper just to sop up some of that colour. It's very hard with watercolour to put back in your lights if you remove them or if you've painted over. Another one is I've got a really bright highlight just in here, which I'm going to try and sort of replicate. Okay. Now while that is still wet, I'm going to pop in the ground. This is dry. I just need to be careful not to let it bleed into the sky. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a sepia colour for this. I want an earthy brown. You could use a burnt umber if you don't have sepia. Keeping it very simple for these stages. As far as the detail where you can see that it's bleeding into the sky a little bit, I'm not too fussed with that. As I said, it's going to be covered with trees, and also it kind of looks a little bit like grass, so I'm not too concerned, although I will bring that up just a little bit so it sort of covers my pencil line. Again, not that it's worrying me too much. I'm going to lift out a tiny bit of colour here as well, just while it's still wet. And go back in with a little bit more pigment, a little bit of a thicker mix, so I have a stronger version of this same colour just for the bottom here. Okay. Just going to try and lift out some more of this cloud too, as the paper was so wet and the colour was moving so much that it's kind of filled itself back in up here. That's okay. Just be careful about the paper towel you use as well if you do use that. I'm using Viva, which is quite textured, so it can leave a bit of an imprint in your painting. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to dry this off. I'll just pause the video while I do that so you don't have to listen to the dryer. Okay, so that's pretty dry now. I'm going to go back in and add some more layers into this sky. And I'm going to go back in with that alizarin crimson colour. So this is wet onto dry now. So I'm going to try and use a bit of a watered down version of this alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson generally is a fugitive colour, but permanent alizarin crimson by Daniel Smith has a better light fast rating. So I'm just trying to pop in some of the darker shapes of these clouds. I'm actually going to mix in a bit of that Imperial Purple that I used earlier into this part of the cloud, let them bleed together. Let the water do the work for you. And just with a damp brush, I'm just going to go in and just soften out some of these edges here. I want to try and keep that light in the sky there. Again, just a damp brush to soften out the edges here. Okay, now with that Imperial Purple, I'm going to darken up this side. It's kind of like a dramatic, stormy, looks like it's about to storm kind of sky. Very simple. I might pop some birds in to break up the image, make it look a little bit more interesting. It's one good thing with the photo references, you can choose to follow it exactly, or you could, you know, use elements from different images and create something that's all your own. It's just a guide. Just using that clean brush again just to soften out these edges. Be careful not to have too much water on the brush because it will cause some disturbances to the paint, so it'll cause it to put in these nasty cauliflowers if you're not careful. So when I clean the brush, I'm actually dabbing it off onto some paper towel just to remove some of that excess water. It's a fine balance between removing too much water and then having too much water on the brush. This is just all things that you learn by playing with the paint, so I just definitely encourage you to give it a go. Okay, so I'm going to add some more of that Prussian Blue. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to mix in some burnt sienna just to tone down that blue a little bit, give it a bit more of a grey even though it's quite a muted blue when you compare it to phthalo, I just don't, I wanted it a little bit more muted as well. So it looks quite stark blue against that purple. As this is rough paper, I can sort of skip my brush using more like a dry brush technique against the surface of the paper when it's dry like this. See, it's leaving these little lighter parts where the paint isn't touching the paper. It kind of skips across the paper, so you can add some interesting textures that way. It's just allowing your materials to do some of the work with you, or for you. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of that purple in with the blue, and I'm just going to add some of the clouds down the bottom here, again allowing that paper to do some of the work there. I don't want to fuss with it too much. Sometimes, and I know I'm guilty of doing that, is that I fuss with things too much and then I lose that raw essence of the painting. Okay, so I'm just going to pop some more darks into the earth here. So I'm going to mix my sepia colour again, but this time I'm going to add a little bit of black into it. Just accidentally added a bit of raw umber in there too, picking up the wrong colour. Just wanted this a little bit darker. So we're going to have this contrast of this sort of bright, sort of colourful sky and a more silhouette, not completely silhouette, but a more silhouette in the earth and then the trees that we're going to add in. Again, this is now wet paint onto dry paper again, still. Again, allow that brush to skip over the surface of the paper. I'm going to go add a little bit more black. So this is almost a pure black mixture. There are a lot of artists that won't use black paint because it tends to make your painting look a little bit flat. So you ideally should mix a black with some other colours. Like you could do that with a mixture of ultramarine and burnt sienna or something like that. You could make a nice black. But I like, especially when it comes to silhouettes, I don't mind using a straight black. You get that contrast, so it's up to you what you want to do. Learn the rules so you can break them, I say. I'm just going to pop in a bit more of that black with the sepia, a stronger mix of that just up into that top line again. This should blend a little bit nicer, being that that paint is still wet that I've applied on there. I'm kind of doing like a scribbly motion. I'm not laying it down perfectly. I want to have some variation in the strokes so that resembles land. Best thing about landscapes is that it's about suggestion. It's building shapes to give the suggestion that that your shapes make up the image. Just going over some of those lighter bits. It's a little bit too light. Alright, so I think now is a good time to go ahead and dry this again, and we can start adding in some of those trees. A good way to tell if your paper is dry is by seeing if it feels cool to the touch as well, but this is all nice and dry now. So next we're going to go in and add some of these trees. If you're looking at the reference compared to this part of the sky is much brighter, but I'm going to leave it like this because, well, for now anyway, we'll see how I feel after adding these trees. I don't want to fuss with this too much and lose what I have here. So that's what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to mix up black, and I am going to add in a little bit more of that sepia. I don't want it to be completely black to start with. We'll just see how we go. Okay. So I'm using a number 8 round brush here. Earlier I was using a number 12. These are the black velvet round brushes. I like a synthetic round. I think these ones might be a mix. There wasn't a lot of information when I bought them. Okay, round brushes come to a nice point, so that's why I'm going to use these. And I'm going to start just by drawing in, and I'm holding the brush further back so that I'm not having serious control like I would if I was holding it like this. Holding it further back will allow you to keep the lines a little bit looser. So I want to keep them loose so that it looks more organic. Start just by drawing in some trunks, these trees. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of leaves and branches. I actually do want to make a bit more bolder mix than that. It's a little bit too transparent. Don't have to follow this exactly. Let your reference serve you, not the other way around. Ultimately, they're going to look like trees. They may not look exactly like the trees in the photo, but if you went to look at the reference, you'd go, yep, that's a sky and those are some trees. That's the main thing. It's the impression that you're creating. So the good thing about a round brush like this is that we can use the very point of the brush, but we can actually use the belly of the brush to create some bigger brush strokes. So there's a lot of variation that you can create within this one brush. So I'm going to go in and add some of this, of the leaves, and I might add some branches after, we'll just see. I'm just going to dot them in pushing down closer to the belly of the brush will give me bigger marks. I think there's actually a fence in this reference as well. I don't need to add that in if I don't want to though. I'm just going to see how it's looking when we get there. I keep adding in a little bit more black as I'm going here. Because the paint seems to water down a little bit and becomes a little bit more translucent, transparent, more than what I want. I don't want to fill this in entirely because I want to have some of that light peeking through the trees. We can go in and add more branches, more tree trunks. Actually just adding in some like bushes in the background here too. And not in the reference, but I'm going to add some around the trunks of the trees as well, letting that texture of the paper create some of that texture variation. Kind of looks like the sun is peeking through the trees. There's some, looks like some light coming in on the ground through the trees, which it doesn't really look like that in the reference, but I like how it's turning out, so I'm just going to go with it. Just going to keep building these leaves. Another thing you want to do when painting things in nature is to, especially if you're maybe creating something from your imagination, or you're using a reference or several references as base guides and then adding in your own changes, is to draw things in odd numbers, because things in nature are never uniform, really. So you wouldn't have like a manicured garden, like a nice garden that's like a botanical kind of garden, or somewhere where you've got people that are building them and looking after them. They can have nice symmetry and sort of perfect, you know, they might plant a bunch of trees in a row, whereas in nature they're not going to grow like that. So even though these are kind of in a row, they're not straight, they're not all the same size. So we have a contrast of size and shape. And then we have, in this piece, we have contrast of colour. So these black trees against the sky. These have faded back a little bit as they're drying. So I can go in and add a little bit more paint if I want to, but we'll see. It's important to sometimes take a step back and look at your painting from a distance too, especially with a landscape, as I was saying before, about it being made up of little shapes. You can get caught up in the details pretty easily, so it's good to gain some perspective by taking a step back. I'm kind of drawing in, or painting in sort of this sideways fashion to make it kind of look like there's some sun peeking through, continuing this light peeking through here. So by not having gone in too dark in the beginning, I'm able to layer over the top of this and make it look a little bit like a nice glow coming through the trees. Like these trees are casting a bit of a shadow. I'm not letting myself get too fussy with it. I just wanted to do a quick little painting today. I am going to go in and just darken this up just a little bit. Okay, I think now's a good time to dry this as well. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is add in a few little birds. I'm going to use that same mix of black, just watered down a little bit, and I'm going to use a smaller round brush because I want to make these birds a little bit smaller. So I'm switching to a number 4 round. And I'm just going to sort of add a few just in this little area here. I think that would offset that nicely. This is where I want to have a little bit more control, so I'm going to hold it a little bit closer only because I want them to be small. You could always practice if you have some practice paper, just like little V's or flatter or open, just to add a few variations. And as I spoke about before about having these variation in the trees, we want to have odd numbers. So we'll have odd numbers of the birds as well. We can also add in a little variation in the size because that will make it look like the birds. So that one looks like it's further away than this one because it's much smaller. Actually wouldn't mind having some even tinier ones a little bit closer to the trees, like they're just flying away. They probably just look a little bit like branches at the moment, or little leaves. That's one of those things that's kind of open for interpretation by the viewer. They can make up their own story. I'm just going to add in a few little birds a little bit further away over there. Try not to go too overboard with it. I don't want to overdo it. These are so small as well, so it hopefully it looks okay. Looks okay to me. Anyway, I'm gonna call this one done. Like I said, it was just a quick little landscape study. If you follow along with this or want to have a go at painting it yourself, you are more than welcome to. I'd love to see what you create. You can feel free to tag me on Facebook or Instagram. I'd love to see what you create out of it. I'll post the photo reference so you can see that, and feel free to put your own spin on it. Art is all about your own interpretation, so you'll see that mine has varied quite far away from the photo reference that I used, but that's the beauty of art. It's all about how you see the world and how you interpret it and how you represent it. So anyway, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer them to the best of my abilities, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you want to see more content from me. Give me some feedback if this is the kind of content as well. This is the first time I've done something like this, so happy to do more in the future, but we'll see if that's something that you guys want to see from me. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Enjoy your painting, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.